Karoline Leavitt's recent speech was a clear and compelling reminder of the deep divide between two fundamentally different visions for America. While her opponent focused on condemning the nation, pointing to its faults and magnifying its past and present struggles, Leavitt took a different route, one rooted in patriotism, gratitude, and historical perspective. She didn't shy away from the realities of America's imperfections, but she did what many Americans are longing to see from their leaders. She defended the core values and achievements that have made the United States a global beacon of freedom and opportunity. Her calm demeanor was key. There was no firestorm of emotion, no attempt to match outrage with outrage. Instead, she presented a controlled and composed critique of the kind of rhetoric that tears down rather than builds up. She spoke on behalf of the many citizens who feel alienated when their country is consistently portrayed as irredeemable. To her, that narrative doesn't reflect the full story. It's a distortion, a politically convenient half-truth used to score points rather than uplift people. One of the most powerful aspects of her argument was how she grounded it in the American story, the story of a nation built not on perfection but on progress. From its founding, the United States has grappled with immense challenges, including war, economic hardship, civil rights struggles, and political division. But through each trial, it has moved forward. That resilience, she argued, is something to be proud of, not ashamed of. Leavitt emphasized that the arc of American history is one of striving, of becoming a more perfect union. That's a cause for admiration, not condemnation. She also brought attention to the millions of people around the world who dream of coming to America, not because it is perfect, but because it offers something rare: freedom, opportunity, and the right to shape one's own future. That global perspective is often missing in domestic debates. When critics within the country speak as though the United States is fundamentally broken, they overlook the reality that for countless others, it remains a land of hope. Leavitt tapped into that truth with clarity and conviction. Her speech pushed back against what she sees as a trend of performative pessimism, where highlighting the flaws of the nation becomes more important than working to fix them. She suggested that it's easy to criticize, to point fingers, and to dwell on the negative. What's harder and more meaningful is to offer solutions while maintaining faith in the ideals that underpin the country. Her tone wasn't dismissive of real issues. On the contrary, she acknowledged them. But she also made the case that it's possible to work for justice, equality, and reform without vilifying the entire system. Leavitt's remarks resonated most deeply when she turned to the people she said she was speaking for: ordinary Americans who work hard, raise families, and love their country despite its flaws. Many of these individuals feel unheard in national conversations dominated by elite voices and sensationalist media. They see their values mocked, their history rewritten, and their patriotism portrayed as naive or dangerous. Leavitt's words gave those people a sense of representation. She articulated a belief in America that is optimistic but not naive, grounded but not cynical. Her critique also touched on the importance of unity. She argued that constantly framing the nation as inherently oppressive sows division and distrust. Instead of inspiring reform, that approach can deepen resentment and alienation. Patriotism, she suggested, is not about ignoring the bad. It's about believing in the good and working to expand it. It's about seeing the nation's potential and helping it live up to its promises. That mindset, she said, is essential if Americans are to move forward together. Ultimately, the strength of her message came from its balance. It wasn't blind praise, but it wasn't relentless criticism either. It was a defense of American ideals, delivered with poise and perspective. In a moment where many voices are shouting past one another, Leavitt's calm, reasoned patriotism stood out. It reminded listeners that loving a country doesn't mean denying its flaws. It means committing to help it grow, with the belief that it is still worth fighting for. Karoline Leavitt's approach during the televised exchange was a striking example of how clarity, composure, and control can be far more effective than outrage or theatricality. In an age where political discourse is often dominated by raised voices, personal attacks, and emotional manipulation, her calm yet forceful delivery stood in stark contrast. What made her performance so impactful was not just the content of her critique, but the manner in which she delivered it, unshaken, unbothered, and unapologetically firm. Rather than getting drawn into a shouting match or descending into the kind of verbal chaos that defines so many political confrontations, she maintained a disciplined and measured tone. This wasn't weakness or timidity. It was precision. Her words were deliberate, sharpened by evidence and confidence, and she knew exactly where to strike. She didn't need volume to make her point. She relied on logic, facts, and rhetorical clarity to expose contradictions and inconsistencies. The calmness in her voice did not dilute the strength of her arguments, it amplified them. This method of controlled discourse allowed her to navigate complex issues without oversimplifying them. She addressed the criticisms being leveled at America with patience, yet never allowed falsehoods or exaggerations to go unchallenged. She dissected each talking point with surgical attention, peeling back layers of ideological fluff to reveal their weak foundations. In doing so, she made it clear that understanding the facts is not the same as embracing cynicism. Her ability to remain steady under pressure gave weight to her message and forced viewers to take notice. Her calm demeanor also served as a silent rebuke to the tone of her opposition. While others leaned on impassioned rhetoric and emotional appeals to sway public sentiment, Leavitt demonstrated that cool-headed analysis could be equally, if not more, persuasive. Her refusal to get flustered or distracted by inflammatory remarks showcased a maturity and steadiness that many viewers likely found refreshing. It sent a message that real leadership isn't about shouting the loudest, it's about showing strength through discipline. There's also a strategic element to her approach. In staying composed, she avoided giving her opponents any emotional leverage. No outbursts, no interruptions, no ad hominem attacks, just straightforward rebuttals that stripped away theatrics and forced a focus on substance. When confronted with sweeping generalizations and accusations, she answered with specific examples and counterpoints. Her demeanor told viewers that she wasn't there to entertain or to provoke, but to correct the record and elevate the discussion. What made her performance even more compelling was that her calmness wasn't detached or robotic. It was intentional and firm. She didn't come across as passive or disengaged. On the contrary, she projected control, assurance, and moral clarity. She gave the impression of someone who had done her homework, who was deeply invested in the issues, and who believed in the value of respectful, informed disagreement. That balance between firmness and composure gave her a kind of quiet authority that often gets lost in televised political debates. Her use of tone also worked to subtly reframe the narrative. By refusing to mirror the intensity of her opposition, she exposed the performative nature of outrage-driven politics. She turned the temperature down without diminishing the urgency of her points, making it clear that passion doesn't have to mean pandemonium. In doing so, she reached audiences who might otherwise tune out when discussions become too volatile or emotionally charged. Her calmness invited people in. It allowed space for consideration rather than confrontation. This approach was especially important given the subject matter. Discussing national identity, values, and criticisms of America is inherently polarizing. It's easy for such conversations to devolve into finger-pointing and ideological tribalism, but Leavitt modeled how to tackle difficult topics without losing credibility or composure. She laid out her positions with firmness, but also with clarity and civility. This earned her not only attention, but a level of respect that often eludes participants in contentious debates. By remaining calm under pressure, she also demonstrated a kind of emotional resilience that's increasingly rare in politics. It's easy to react, to lash out, to match aggression with aggression. It's much harder to absorb pressure and respond with intelligence and grace. That kind of steadiness suggests a deeper confidence, not just in oneself, but in the ideas one is defending. Leavitt's ability to maintain that poise sent a message not just about the issues at hand, but about the kind of leadership style she embodies. Karoline Leavitt's message struck a chord with many Americans because she spoke from a place of authenticity, one that reflected the experiences and concerns of everyday citizens rather than career politicians or media elites. In an era where many people feel unheard and overlooked, She gave a voice to those who often don't see themselves represented on national television or in political discourse. Her remarks served as a reminder that there is a vast segment of the population, working families, small business owners, veterans, and middle-class Americans, who take pride in their country, uphold traditional values, and feel disheartened by the constant stream of negativity aimed at the nation they love. She didn't speak in lofty theoretical terms or from a detached ideological standpoint. Instead, her words were grounded in the real-life struggles and aspirations of people who get up early, work hard, pay their taxes, and contribute to their communities without asking for praise or attention. These are the individuals who believe in the American dream because they live it or strive toward it every day. They know the country isn't perfect, but they also recognize the immense opportunities it provides. Leavitt channeled that sentiment and turned it into a powerful counterweight to the criticism and blame often leveled at the United States. Her tone and message also reflected a growing frustration among those who feel that their voices are being drowned out by a media culture obsessed with conflict and negativity. For many Americans, the constant focus on what is wrong with the country ignores everything that is right. They see their hard work go unrecognized, their values mocked, and their patriotism questioned. Leavitt offered a reminder that these people matter and their perspectives deserve a seat at the table. She didn't just defend them. She embodied their point of view, speaking plainly, confidently, and without condescension. She also made it clear that loving one's country is not something that should be controversial or require explanation. For many citizens, patriotism is not performative. It's lived out daily through responsibility, service, and community engagement. Leavitt emphasized that standing up for America doesn't mean ignoring its problems. It means believing that it is capable of addressing them without tearing down its institutions or abandoning its founding principles. This belief resonates deeply with those who see their identity as intertwined with the nation's journey, people who want to see their country succeed, not be constantly undermined by its own leaders. The values she highlighted, personal responsibility, hard work, respect for tradition, and belief in opportunity, are not abstract ideals to the people she represents. They are guiding principles that shape daily decisions and long-term goals. When those values are dismissed or vilified in public discourse, it creates a cultural disconnect. Leavitt's remarks bridged that divide. She reminded the audience that policy debates and ideological battles are not just political theater. They have real consequences for real people. Her speech brought those stakes into sharp focus, especially for those who feel as if their livelihoods and communities are being ignored. She also called out the disconnect between the political elite and the general public. While some elected officials and commentators seem more interested in scoring points or gaining social media attention, ordinary Americans are focused on providing for their families, securing a future for their children, and maintaining a sense of dignity. Leavitt's calm yet firm articulation of these concerns demonstrated that it's possible to engage in public debate while remaining grounded in the experiences of the people one serves. By aligning herself with everyday Americans, she challenged the idea that patriotism is outdated or naive. Instead, she framed it as a source of strength, a unifying force that transcends politics. She spoke not from a place of division, but from a desire to recenter the national conversation on the values and aspirations of the majority, who may not always make headlines but form the foundation of the country's success. Leavitt's speech also underscored a sense of protectiveness over the nation's image and legacy. Many Americans feel that the cultural narrative has shifted too far towards self-criticism, often at the expense of truth and balance. They believe that while it's important to acknowledge historical wrongs, it's equally important to celebrate progress and preserve national pride. Leavitt gave those concerns a clear voice, not by dismissing the past, but by reminding listeners that America's future depends on recognizing its potential and believing in its promise. Karoline Leavitt delivered a pointed and unwavering critique of the narrative that portrays the United States as fundamentally flawed and inherently unjust. Through calm and confident delivery, she didn't merely rebut criticisms. She revealed a deeper pattern, one she described as a coordinated effort to undermine the values that have long defined the country. Her remarks centered on the idea that this constant disparagement of America isn't accidental or incidental. It's part of a broader ideological push to reshape the national identity into something unrecognizable. She exposed how repeated messaging that casts America in a negative light, often coming from the political and cultural elite, erodes national unity and chips away at civic pride. Instead of acknowledging both the challenges and the achievements that define the nation's story, some voices in the public arena opt to focus exclusively on what is wrong. Leavitt challenged this approach directly. She argued that such rhetoric is not about healthy criticism or meaningful reform. Rather, it functions as a tool to stir division, weaken the public's trust in its institutions, and sow resentment across communities. Her comments didn't dismiss the country's past struggles or present flaws. Instead, they emphasized that America is unique in its ability to recognize its shortcomings and strive to improve. What she objected to was the deliberate attempt to frame the nation's history and systems as irredeemably corrupt. This kind of absolutist thinking, she said, breeds cynicism, especially among young people who are constantly bombarded with the idea that their country is a force of oppression rather than progress. Leavitt highlighted that this narrative does more than simply express discontent. It actively discourages national cohesion. If people are taught to see their country as broken beyond repair, they are less likely to engage in constructive dialogue, participate in civic life, or believe in their own agency to bring about change. That, she argued, is one of the most dangerous effects of the constant disparagement of America. It removes hope from the equation and replaces it with anger and fatalism. She also pointed out how this ideological campaign often masks itself in the language of compassion or justice, when in reality, it leads to policies and cultural movements that divide rather than unite. By casting America as the problem, this mindset seeks to delegitimize its foundational principles: freedom, equality under the law, and individual responsibility. Leavitt warned that such ideas are not merely rhetorical. They influence legislation, education, and national discourse in ways that have long-term consequences. In addressing this trend, she emphasized that criticism should not come at the expense of truth. Constructive critique is necessary for any thriving democracy, but when it becomes habitual disdain, it no longer serves the public good. Leavitt drew a line between those who love the country enough to want to make it better and those who appear to loathe it while using its freedoms to attack it from within. That distinction, she argued, matters deeply because it determines whether the nation moves forward with shared purpose or continues to fracture under the weight of ideological hostility. Her speech also resonated with citizens who feel demoralized by the unrelenting negativity surrounding public discourse. People who work hard, support their communities, and uphold the law often feel betrayed when their patriotism is dismissed or ridiculed. Leavitt offered those people validation and a sense of affirmation. She made the case that standing up for one's country is not a political statement. It's a deeply human one, rooted in gratitude and belief in a collective future. She was particularly effective in identifying how these anti-American narratives are often divorced from the real experiences of most Americans. While critics in elite circles may dwell on the flaws of the system, millions of people live lives that testify to the opportunities and freedoms the country provides. Leavitt gave voice to those whose stories are overlooked in the rush to condemn. She reminded her audience that for all its imperfections, America remains a place where people from every background can succeed, contribute, and be heard. Through this message, she called for a renewed sense of responsibility, not just to defend the nation's image, but to actively protect the values and institutions that hold it together. Her critique wasn't simply against another opinion. It was against an entire worldview that seeks to tear down without building up. She advocated instead for a spirit of resilience, optimism, and respect for the ideals that have allowed the country to endure and progress. Karoline Leavitt's remarks left a strong and lasting impression, not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. In a political landscape where division, noise, and hostility often drown out substance, she brought clarity, poise, and conviction. Her defense of America was not built on blind loyalty or romanticized nostalgia. It was grounded in the belief that this country, with all its complexities, is still worth defending. She made it clear that acknowledging America's flaws does not mean discarding its ideals, and that reform is most meaningful when it's motivated by a genuine love for the country, not resentment toward it. Leavitt's tone, calm but unwavering, demonstrated that strength doesn't require shouting, and that patriotism is not an outdated concept to be mocked or dismissed. Her message spoke to millions who are tired of watching their nation be reduced to nothing more than its mistakes. To them, she offered a voice that affirmed their values, validated their concerns, and challenged the idea that criticizing America must always come from a place of condemnation rather than hope. She effectively drew a line between constructive dialogue and destructive rhetoric. In doing so, she showed that there's a vast difference between striving to make a country better and tearing it down. Her ability to maintain composure while delivering such a strong critique gave her words even more weight. The contrast between her measured delivery and the emotionally charged language often used in opposition helped underscore the seriousness and sincerity of her points. Ultimately, Karoline Leavitt reminded the public that true leadership is not defined by theatrics or ideological pandering, but by the ability to articulate a vision that uplifts rather than divides. Her remarks called for a reawakening of national pride, a recentering of American values, and a refusal to allow cynicism and pessimism to define the public narrative. In doing so, she did more than defend her beliefs. She reignited a conversation about what it means to love one's country in today's America.